What I want to show you today is how it's possible to create amazing underwater imagery without necessarily needing to hire out tank space, learning to scuba dive, or sending thousands of pounds on kit. Everything you see here can be achieved with a simple waterproof camera, cheap lights, and remembering not to breathe. And it's something almost anyone can try. Subject to risk assessments, obviously. Okay, a quick bit about me. I'm a creative portrait photographer. I've been doing this 3 or 4 years, and the underwater stuff, 18 months or so. But before we begin, a preamble about Media Rats. In 1997, I began a degree at this place, Royal Holloway, in the poshest and leafiest part of Surrey, just opposite Windsor Park, where I learned about film theory and media production and had the full use of studio facilities and equipment, plus an art department for making props and sets. So I ended up spending 3 years making short student films. The course was Media Arts, which inevitably led to my production company name. And that's what it's been for the last 24 years, although I did lose the domain with the S at the end. So now I have Media Rats with a Z, which is cooler anyway. After graduating, I did a bit of freelancing, places like the Royal Mint in Wales and in the innards of Big Ben, 2005. But ultimately, it didn't really cover the cost of living down south. So I gravitated back up north and got proper jobs again, but kept Media Rats going as a web design company and made a few animated shorts for fun. So as the filmmaking tailed off, as people lost interest, started families or moved away, I started taking more interest in photography as something I could do on my own without a crew. For a long time, it was mostly animals and festivals and sport and whatever I happened to be doing at the time. But after a bit, I decided to look into learning more. Initially with Newcastle Photography Group, which offered 2-hour sessions on Saturday mornings. It was a nice way to spend a morning and became quite addictive, trying to outdo the previous week's shots. When I began to realize street photography wasn't really my thing. I'm a lot happier with people who want to collaborate and share ideas. So I decided to move on to something different. I ended up doing workshops with Fusco Media, which was a total eye-opener, doing shoots like this, standing waist deep in waterfalls. Suddenly I was in my element. And I had an epiphany. Photography can be anything you want it to be. There are no rules. It became about mise-en-scène, bringing together people and landscapes and accessories and creating compositions from scratch, bringing in as many elements as possible to create something that's never existed before. The elements, of course, being earth, air, fire, water. Smoke also became a big obsession. Like water, it's an agent of chaos and doesn't take direction well, but the results can be amazing. Also, the whole genre of fantasy with people like Shelby putting together the most amazing outfits and trying to find a way to do them justice. Also cosplay. For a frustrated filmmaker, it's fun trying to create a little tableau that could be shots from a movie. Also, I've enjoyed dabbling outside both ends of the visible spectrum. But levitation is what led me into all of this. I was obsessed with levitation for a while. It's a simple trick of having a model balancing on something, then digitally removing it. I say simple, but I'm not the one doing the balancing. It was on this shoot at Seton Sluice that I began to become obsessed with water again. I discovered this place accidentally while researching the amazing Delville Mausoleum, the world's most outrageous monument to a man who died from being kicked in the nuts. Do some research later, it's good. On this day, we'd come to shoot in the still reflective waters of the tidal rock pools, but eventually ended up in the open sea, just deep in the water, with an expensive, non-waterproof camera. It was exhilarating to be amongst the waves, but slightly scary without equipment built for the purpose. Around that time, I started working with Sarah and discussing ideas for shooting underwater movement and area, something she'd been working on independently for some time. So I took the plunge and bought a housing for my A7 II. I liked the idea of using a full-size camera and managed to find a housing for it for £150. The main advantage of having a housing for a full-size camera is that the sensor can give good results in dodgy lighting conditions. It can capture a lot more light due to the size of the sensor, and the high ISO settings are possible with minimal additional noise. The diving light pictured is a generic one I found on Amazon. It's small, about 50 quid, but the light output is phenomenal for the size, and it can give constant illumination for 20 to 30 minutes on one set of batteries. Other options are available. Compacts and action cams like the Olympus Tough TG series, the Ricoh WG series, or a humble GoPro can produce great results and are a lot easier to use, it has to be said. However, exposures will generally be longer and more prone to motion blur as a result. This was our very first shoot at Cardew Lodge. I learned a lot. Water conspires against you in a number of ways. Clarity is paramount. Any kind of murkiness is a problem, and here the waters weren't great. Also, even the cleanest water tends to filter out longer wavelengths of light, starting at the red end of the spectrum. After 10 meters, red is gone completely. And you'd warned me about all this in advance. Here you can see how water filters out red light. It starts at the red end of the spectrum. After 10 meters, red is gone. If your camera and lights are both 5 meters from the subject, the light path is 10 meters, and the red won't make it all the way back to the camera. It's possible to tidy up this in editing, sort out the white balance, push up the clarity and dehaze, maybe add a bit more contrast. But the golden rule is to get yourself and your lens as close as possible to the subject with the widest lens available to you. The closer you get, the better things look. These two shots have identical settings. Within a second, you can instantly see the difference in the skin tone and the colors. The first shot took a massive amount of editing just to get it to that kind of quality. The other obvious issue you can see is a lot of vignetting caused by having a physically short lens and the casing having a long barrel. Before the next shoot, I invested in a hemispheric dome for the camera to give a much wider field of view. This was another 140 quid. Where I'd previously been getting vignetting at 28 millimeters, I can now shoot as wide as 17 millimeters easily. I've also fortuitously found a cheap underwater strobe on eBay, which just happened to fit the Nikonos connector on the camera case. In an ideal world, with a greater budget, flash would be the ideal solution, especially with an underwater studio setup with multiple slaves triggered by the wide strobe. But in this model from eBay, which was pretty old, there's no TTL metering, nor any manual control, so the intensity just depends on how far away you are. Also, the flash head needs to be quite close to the camera, so the lighting would always be some kind of rabbit in headlights. But the refresh rate of 5 to 6 seconds was the main issue. I could have fired off 24 shots in burst mode while waiting for the flash to recycle. It always takes a few shots to get a nice flash balance, which isn't really an option when everyone is still waiting to breathe. So for the next shoot, we return to diving lights again. Also here we have a studio spotlight from above, off to the right-hand side of the screen. More studio lights above the water would be nice in theory. It's just a question of having somewhere to place lights safely. Poolside is rarely an option. But as a fantasy photographer, the ethereal qualities are something I just love. I felt we'd struck gold with this set. This was part of a Klimt-inspired series, and as always, the art direction was from Sarah. Everything we tried here worked pretty well. We're starting to get a consistent workflow going. After a while, we found our permanent home in the diving centre at Bolden. Everything suddenly shifted up a clear. You can see the difference in the clarity of the water immediately. Just look at the vibrant primary colours. It also has good underwater lights there, which sometimes are really good for fill-in, or sometimes they just turn off for maximum drama. In the water, everything is moving, even when you don't want them to be. Models are moving, fabrics are moving, photographer and camera are moving, slowly drifting and bobbing up and down. Sometimes this could be this aesthetic you want. Sometimes you might want swirling fabrics, soft, diffuse, abstract and ethereal, gentle impressionism. But generally that's the opposite of the aesthetic I like. I generally shoot at the fastest shutter speed I can get away with and the highest ISO. Here you can also see the gradual fall off of colours from right to left, but the water is still gloriously clear. So being a couple of meters away from the subject isn't really an issue anymore. Here you can see a couple of our lights in situ on an Amazon Basics light stand. The black bags you can see at the bottom of the pool are weights. These are an unsung hero. Human beings are just too buoyant for this kind of thing. If you're moving, it's fine. You can use your limbs to propel yourself down and hold that position. If you're posing for a photo, or if you're the one holding the camera, you can't move, so your natural buoyancy makes you bob back up to the surface. Secreting weights around your person helps to overcome this and lets you stay under with a minimum of effort. At this point, we start adding our own backdrops as an alternative to the swimming pool blue. We'd find the biggest backdrop we could use and lash it into place. Because of the distance from the subject and the wide angle lenses used, regular sized backdrops were never big enough. In a studio, a 1.5 by 2 meter backdrop is usually fine, using a portrait lens of 50 to 85 millimeters. Underwater, focal length is commonly towards the 18 to 28 end of the spectrum, so something pretty huge is needed. I now currently work with 3 by 4 meters and still end up photoshopping the black edges of the edit. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to interrupt me. I'm just bobbing through it generally. It took a while to get this right. We initially had backdrops secured under weights, under rocks, etc., and they'd still end up drifting off and doing their own things. The backdrop tends to act as a sail, and any movement in the water just encourages it to drift off, which eventually led us to this solution: holding backdrops in place with hairbands and suction hooks. It took a lot of experimentation to get to this point. Suction hooks were the first thing we could find that work above and below the water and stay in one place without drifting off easily. Now we were able to pin all 4 corners securely and any additional bits that were drifting about too much. I love black because it gives any shot punch. Plus it takes us away from the wall-to-wall blue of the pool environment. There's only so much you can do with blue. I've tried white as well, but it tends to spend a lot of the time reflecting blue back at you. Someday I'll try another color, but today is not that day. Here you can see I'm still pushing the ISO as high as possible and probably way too high in this instance because this is 160th of a second, which is way faster than I actually need. If people wear black, it doesn't look so good. I try to discourage people from wearing black. Wearing silver and painting yourself gold is just about perfect. Gold and black are just a perfect combination. This is a one that Andy's covered in the past. It's a great way of getting eye-catching shots relatively easily. If the camera's at a narrow enough angle to the surface, no light from above the water will reach the lens. All you see on the surface are reflections of what you're seeing under the water. This is great for inexperienced models who may not be comfortable going too low below the surface. Sometimes you can just get people to lie with their face in the water and it still works fine. Any composition, however simple, gains a whole new dimension with the reflections. And once you start throwing vibrant colours into the mix, you can get dramatic results. One of the big studio tropes that I've used in the past is using coloured gels from different angles to give a dramatic look. This is just as easy to achieve under the water, especially using the lights I use because they have rows of red and blue LEDs in addition to the white. So with red and blue lights in place, you can get something like that pretty much straight away. It was around this point I decided to invest in a second case for my A7 Mark III. This is the biggest investment I've made at about 350 quid, but it does exactly the same job as the A7 II case. The only difference is the Mark III's speed and the ability to shoot in faster bursts allow a lot more shots to be taken in a given time underwater. Another favourite is having a single light placed above the water, causing a ripple effect from the surface to appear in the water below. This just involves turning off the pool lights and overhead lights and having a single light on a stand at the side of the pool. As the light hits the surface of the water, it scatters, with the ripples focusing it into chaotic ribbons and shadows. It gives a more organic feel, less of the artificiality of direct lamplight. It feels more like sunlight from above. You can imagine you're somewhere nice with clear water. Whenever I do this, I try to go at the bottom of the pool to get a silhouette from below, surrounded by the light waves. It's kind of like that shot in Trainspotting that I love, but I've still not quite managed to achieve it. Of course, to get the effect of sunlight, you can't do much better than actual sunlight. Here at Cardew Lodge, which has windows all around, it's bad in terms of controlling where the light is coming from. When you have sunlight like this, it makes it all worthwhile. And it's nice to be able to make the most of it. So over the past year, this is the kind of thing we've been doing. Organising increasingly crazy and ambitious group shoots, generally from the vivid imagination of Sarah. Here we have the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. It's always quite a juggling act to get everyone underwater and in position and in character simultaneously. But you'd be surprised how quickly people's confidence grows. Most people take to it straight away. Every couple of months, we have an exploration session where we test out new ideas, see which would be good to open up to other participants. Often it ends up being our best work due to the amount of time we have to get things right. We had a chance to do a shoot at Pine House Hydrotherapy Pool in Northumberland, which was small enough to be able to add backdrops and foreground props suspended from bars from photography backdrop stands. This had the potential to allow far more complex setups and staging. Unfortunately, the quality of the water was not great. I think I'd been taking the perfect waters of the diving pool for granted. It took a lot of polishing just to see the subtle pastel shades you see here. So we ended up going back to the diving pool. Just in this one final word on backdrops. I've never been able to get anything convincing to work with pictorial backdrops. Here we had sakura blossoms that I thought would be perfect for this outfit, but it ends up looking washed out and it's hard to light satisfactorily, so it's still work in progress with anything pictorial. And of course, for photography, you don't even need to hire a pool. We live on an island, water is everywhere. This insane landscape around Seaton Sluice is my go-to place. When the tide goes out, there are pools of still water with real sea life just waiting to be exploited. Using the hemispheric dome under-over shots are so easy and create a whole new dimension. The light levels and white balance need equalizing, but that's what Lightroom and Photoshop are for. Focusing works different above and below due to the refractive index. So if you close down the aperture, you can increase the depth of field or open it up again to create something more interesting. British seawater really isn't the best in the world. It's dark and gloomy and gothic, but that just happens to be my favourite aesthetic anyway. And when the sun's shining, it's still kind of lovely. And I can do things like mermaid core. So this is under the surface at the actual tidal rock pools of Seaton Sluice. There's permanent seaweed in place and the rock pools are always full of water and you can get about 8-foot depth at the best places. The water clarity isn't great, but it's nice to have something organic with rough edges compared to the sterile environment of the pool. And thanks to having a fully waterproof camera rig, it's a lot safer to get out in the water to take shots and not have to worry about damaging anything. It gives shots more of an intimacy, being in the water and part of the environment, rather than looking on from a distance. And having the protection of the camera housing allows me to take far more of insane shots than I'd otherwise dare attempt. A lot of our shots have ended up being aquatic or water adjacent to varying degrees since then. It's started to permeate everything we do. I'd want to do an Ophelia shoot ever since I first started shooting fantasy. Shooting with Sarah in the rock pools was just perfect. And now, just a touch about the threat of AI. The speed of development over the past few years has been incredible. As a fantasy photographer, I can create the deep dream photo shoots that have been in my head for years. Sirens in tempestuous seas, models wading through flooded palaces, literally anything is now possible. It's a kind of sublime beauty that would be virtually impossible to achieve in real life without a budget of millions. And the realization of the water, the reflection, the refraction, the attenuation is just insanely good. Sometimes it gets confused then. Occasionally people end up with their heads simultaneously above and below the surface. But I'm kind of grasping at straws for humanity here. Over the past 6 months, AI has got over all the early snags it has with eyes, early snags with limbs, early snags with hands. So I guess that's not going to be anything it won't overcome in due course. But it's not all bad. Why not do both? Why not have fantasy photography plus AI? Fantasy photography augmented by AI. So this is from a merman shoot we did with Duncan, and we've just added in the rest of it, and turned him into some sort of weird sea creature. And here Sarah, anyone can be anything they want to be. Mer creature, or just have impossible outfits that are made out of stained glass. And this is just the beginning. Who knows what will be possible in a couple of years from now. And coming to the end, what's next? Go somewhere tropical, underwater UV, projection, flooding actual palaces. At the moment, LEDs. The IP68 underwater lights. Looking forward to trying these out and seeing how much of a game changer it'll be. And thanks for watching. Any questions?
Thanks, Neil. That's I'm really impressed. You've done a whole load of creative stuff that I've kind of started to think about. So the gel thing was, yeah, that works really, really well. I've actually got a couple of those dive lights with the, yeah, I had reliability problems with them, with the white light, but the red and the blue still work fine. So they'd run for maybe, I've got some big batteries, so I've got two that will run pretty much all day, two that kind of overheat after about 20 minutes.
Yeah, I've noticed that they underheat out of the water very quickly, but when they're in the water is a cooling system for them, so they're okay.
Yeah. So, but of course, the red and the blue work fine because there's less LEDs, so less heat. So that's really good. Love the stuff in the rock balls. That's really good. Yeah, superb.
I just want to get back there. We're going back next month at least. So yeah, we need to organise more mermaidy things soon, I think.
Okay. I'm impressed with the number of models you get underwater at once. Having worked with a few, it takes some doing, and to get them all in place at the same time and all kind of looking vaguely in the right direction, that's no mean feat. So well done.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the system I have is I'll duck underwater and tell them to follow me down 5 seconds later, and hopefully they'll do it in synchronization. I mean, there's a lot where people aren't in synchronization, but again, with the continuous light, I can just shoot in almost burst mode and choose the best one out of a dozen.
Yeah, it's all good. What else did I notice in that? There was something else I was going to say, which has escaped me for the minute.
But yeah, all the early stuff that I tried was basically based on your advice anyway. All the stuff about getting as close as possible with the widest lens possible, the most light possible. Yeah,
because it's the other thing. I mean, the light fall off underwater is, forget the inverse square law. It's way worse than that. So any kind of light fall off is going to be bad. The pool water clarity, yeah, you've mentioned that. That's absolutely key. I always now personally dip test the pools that we're in just to check the chemistry, because we've had some real bad. It's usually when the vision's bad, so the water's cloudy, then the pool chemistry is usually off some way, and the dip tests kind of give me a reference for that.
Right, that's way beyond our current skill level. But
it's just like a swimming pool dipstick test. You get a packet of the sticks, dip them in, color match them against a reference chart, and that will tell you whether the pH is in the right range. Because if it isn't, the models will know very quickly, because their eyes will start to be problematic.
Right.
And it also gives you total chlorine and some of the water alkalinity as well, which is a useful gauge. There's nothing you can do about it, but at least tells you what the water condition is.
Yeah.
Or at least nothing you as a pool hirer can do about it. The pool chemistry should be in balance. And one of the pools I actually used that to go back to them and say, look, your dosing system is not working properly, which it indeed wasn't, but they had no idea.
Yeah, I think we've been lucky with the diving centre. It's like the third place we tried, and then the conditions have just been perfect there every time. So
You probably find they've got an automatic doser and a continuous monitoring system.
Yeah. And we've been there like first thing on the morning, and the guy's been there in his scuba gear, vacuuming the base just to get all of the.
Oh yes, that's absolutely key. That's another good thing. I do ask for the ones that I hire to be vacuumed as close to possible as to when I'm going to use it, because when they don't, you get all sorts of debris on the bottom, and that just kicks up into the water, and you just backscatter everywhere.
Yeah, we tend to make a lot of our own debris and then have to go and clear up after ourselves a lot.
Oh yeah, well that's fair. If you kind of make it, it's fair enough to have to clear it up. But yeah. So the pools are pretty good that I use now. They do try and clean immediately before, and it does make a tremendous difference. So yeah, but loving the creative stuff. You kind of, I guess because I've got a lighting style that I know works for me, I've kind of not been so adventurous. So I like the idea of a kind of a try things out kind of shoot.
Yeah, we have a lot of people who've been coming to us with ideas for shoots now because they've been on different things and it's sort of set off ideas. So we're just getting a chain reaction now.
Yeah. And it's interesting, it's personal choice. I mean, sometimes I have another photographer comes to share the pool with me and he lights totally differently, does a different style, and his images are very different styling to mine. Well, that's fine. That's all good. But yeah, well done. It's coming along really good.
Yeah, we've got a couple more interesting ideas. We've got Tron coming up in a couple of weeks, which we're hoping to use the LED strips for. And I've been doing a lot of UV on dry land in a studio, but I'm trying to work out a way of getting it to work underwater.
Okay.
It works for fish, doesn't it? So
yeah. Well, you want something that will fluoresce. So the first thing is to find stuff that fluoresces. I've actually done this a bit with some limited success. The best way is to use the stuff you use for fluorodiving, which is filters for the lights, which make it into, it's not true UV, but it pushes it into very blue end, and then you yellow filter the camera to kill the blue.
Right,
and it allows the kind of things to fluoresce. I've had real problems because the pools I use generally are not easily blacked out, and that's what you need. But I've got the particular wavelength notch filters for my a couple of my YSD1 strobes, so they're not subsea, they're something else anyway, but they're dedicated fluoro filters for the flash. But what I didn't have at the time was a yellow filter I could put behind the Nikonos lens to kind of kill the blue. But it really weird effects. Yeah, it does some really interesting stuff. I've got somebody who does UV body paint, wants to come and trial the stuff, but I need to do it in the winter when we can get the pool dark.
Yeah, so just finding stuff that's not going to come off in the water.
Oh yeah, conventional body paints, absolutely. I've lost a couple of backdrops that are now contaminated with body paint, which won't come off.
Yeah, I've picked up a couple of the filters that are meant to filter out most of visible light and just let the UV through. I managed to crack one by leaving it attached to a continuous light for too long, and the heat just got to it.
Oh yeah, will do. So, yeah.
I'll know for next time.
The Woods glass stuff, yeah. It's kind of interesting. I mean, UV is your only option. Infrared just doesn't go anywhere underwater. It kills it even faster than red. So
I have got an infrared adapted camera, but I can't see it going underwater at any point.
Yeah, it's one of my A7Rs is full spectrum, but it just doesn't do anything with the infrared filters on it underwater. No, but it's really interesting to see, and interesting to see how you're developing it, where you're taking it. So yeah, well done.
Yeah, thanks. We're enjoying experimenting and trying new things as much as possible. It's mostly Sarah's ideas.
Oh, well, that's no bad thing. I think, I mean, I have a lot of people now who, when they come to work with me, will bring ideas and, what about, and can you, and can we, and can we try? And that's always a good thing. Always a good thing.
Yeah, I think our next half dozen have been suggested by people who've come along in the past and have given us ideas.
Yeah, it's nice. But I know you're far away, Andy, but we do have a pool where you can take all the lights. So it's an option.
Yeah. It's if I'm ever up that way, I'll come see you.
But yeah, no, thanks.
We could show you the rock pools as well.
Yeah, no, that would be fun.
You've got to pick the right time of day. There's about 4 hours where the tide's going out and then coming back again before they're underwater permanently. So right. You've got to sort of get out there just as the tide's going out, get in position, then you've got about 2 hours before the tide starts coming back at you again.
Right. That'd be a good thing because it forced me to do something different with the lighting.
Mm-hmm.
There is something softer, isn't there? Something like more organic, how you feel when you're in the water and like the way that you may be.
Yeah, I do get frustrated. I do get frustrated that we don't have beautiful clear water anywhere in Britain. It's always going to be murky to some extent.
Yeah.
Lexi Lane seems to do quite well off Cornwall. She's been shooting the St Ives Mermaid. What's her name?
Oh yeah.
But she's done some really good stuff off off Cornwall. So I'm not sure exactly where, but I know they're down that way. And she shoots with it's another Sony. I think it's an A7R3, but she uses a 28mm, but with Nauticam's the ultra wide supplementary adapter that goes on the front of the housing. That gets us wider than the Konos, so that works pretty well. But they're lots of money, even secondhand, lots of money.
Yeah, I've got like a Tamron 17 to 28. So I think anything wider than 17, I don't think the port will be wide enough for us. Probably get edges in.
Well, it probably will do because the port I use is for the 28f2 on the Sony, and that's a flat port, and then there's either a bayonet or a screw fitting, and the ultra wide adapter sits on the front of that, so wet front and back. So you're not limited by the port and the housing. Yeah. I think one of the options is a 67mm thread on it. The other is Nauticam's bayonet. They have a 67mm, but it's a keyed mount, so it keys on and stays in one place. It doesn't rotate.
Yeah, I think that'd be good for location stuff. But sort of any wider than that, I'd need even bigger backdrops than I'm using now.
Oh yeah. Well, that was what I was going to say. I'm using 2-3 meter ones, which gives me just under 6 meters, and even that's not wide enough. So
yeah, I've got 2 black ones that I could use together, but then I need to do twice as much rigging, so I try to get away with one as much as possible.
Yeah, rigging takes forever. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Are there any other colours you like that work well apart from black?
That was what I was going to say about the colour backgrounds. Grey works surprisingly well because you can make that any colour, just the same as you can. Yeah, so grey works really well. Green screen, so I got a chroma key green, really didn't work at all.
Right.
I think that's and the blue. Actually, the blue works surprisingly well as well. I've got a kind of slightly darker blue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I might try grey. That's kind of my aesthetic anyway.
Yeah, but grey because it's kind of useful because you can make it any colour you want by just how you light it.
And we have people who still turn up wearing black, and then we can't use the black backdrop for them.
Yeah. That's why I drop the two lots in. So I drop a full black and a full white typically.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, you can't kill the blue entirely on the white, but it does mean I've got a choice. If they decide to come dark, we've got an option. If they decide to come light and bright, we've got two options.
Yeah, I think that the white I've got might just be a bit feeble and too translucent because it's just sort of thin muslin. So
right, okay.
it might be kind of showing the backdrop, the wall behind, as well as reflecting the overall.
Yeah, I use the vinyls, so they kind of tend. Unfortunately, the pool we use has a current, has a rotational filter system, so it actually blows them away from the side of the pool, which is a pain. But other than that, they pretty much stay in place, and I do weight mine down with shot weights, so they run down literally down the side of the pool. But yeah, the current can be a problem because it'll shift the models without them realizing. It's you don't expect a current in a pool.
Yeah, well, we've got a jet in the shallow end that always sort of keeps trying to blow everything towards the deep end. But the deep end's fine, but then we haven't got that many models who are comfortable going in 3 meters. So it's just if people are happy to do that.
Okay, it did look as though they were kind of within depth, so be able to stand up to get themselves out. I don't know if that's the case or...
Yeah, if people aren't experienced, we keep them within depth where they can stand up.
Okay. One thing that's worked for me, I now put, because I'm shooting against the edge of the pool typically rather than in the middle of it, we put a scaffold square frame projecting over the edge of the pool. And that serves two things. One, you can hang all sorts of things from it. So we hang the swing and the hoop and everything from that. And also it gives the model something to hang on to. So they can kind of hang on to that. They're away from the backdrop, but they can kind of position themselves. And one of the things we do say to them is that you can reach up, hang on and hold on to that. And although your arm will kind of disappear at the surface, it meets its own reflection. So it doesn't look odd.
Yeah. So what's the framework made out of?
Scaffold poles.
All right. It's pretty solid.
Yeah. It's I've got a couple of I made a couple of wooden blocks just so it doesn't crush the backdrop rolls. So it lifts it a little way, but it's I think 6 feet by 5 feet scaffold poles and scaffold clamps. We just lean that over. And it gives them something to grab onto. It does need, obviously, fixing at the back end or significant counterweight. We've got one of our makeup artists quite happily will sit on the back end just to, while we've got people in the water.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I've seen like that was someone had put together something using like plastic pipes, and it just sort of created like an L shape, and then the backdrop sort of just got tacked onto it at the sides with clips, whatever, which seemed quite good. I don't know if it'd be, it would depend if we could get the diving centre to let us leave all the bits there, because it'd be a pain to keep putting it back together every time.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I mean, I like our little suction hooks because you just put them on, flip the hook up, and it's locked, and then it shouldn't move for the duration.
No, that's a neat idea. I like that.
Yeah, and then the backdrops that we use regularly, they've got black hairbands sewn into the corners now, and another one in the middle, and then we just snag them on, and hopefully they're set. The ones under the water, people kick them and stuff, so they do come loose, but generally it just takes a couple of seconds to put them back in place. unfortunately, because they're clear and transparent, it's really hard to see them under the water. And if they fall down to the deep end, I'm kind of going down with a diving light trying to find them again.
Yeah.
They don't do anything useful like floats. They just go straight down to the bottom.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was our best discovery for the past few months, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, I'm going to start looking at grey backdrops after this.
Yeah, because I like a red. I really like a full-on red kind of, because we tried with like a really strong hot pink and it was just too narrow, and but I liked the pop of colour. But I was going to say the other thing about that pool in a weird way, although I wish it was like over the deep end, is that we have the hoist, and it's an electric hoist, so we've put people on there. But I'd never thought of just having someone hold something from there to keep them in place, even a photographer. Like, it might be quite handy, if they knew, like, to feel quite balanced. We'll put some funding in for like a full-on system as part of the other project, which might reap some benefits of. So it'd be like counterweighted aerial, underwater aerial. So you'd be seeing people like pulled up really nice and swift, and other way around. Yeah. I don't quite know how it
would. I did do a kind of fixed tube in place. We tend not to these days, but I had it fixed at 3 points. So it was fixed at the top to the scaffold frame. And then we had off of either side at the bottom, black rope coming down to weight bags full of weight to hold it in place. And that worked pretty well. So it's a more stable thing for people to push against. But the more recent aerial hoopists we've had have been much more accomplished, and they kind of don't need it braced so much.
Yeah. It's exciting. But anyway, right, we should call it a day, I think. You two have managed to gabble for about 20 minutes.
I don't want to hijack it. It's Neil's talk. It's been really interesting.
Oh, no, I'm stealing all your ideas again.
Hey, yeah, do. I'm going to be stealing yours. So.
But yeah, we'll let you know how the underwater tubes work out anyway.
Yeah.
Just worth getting any.
Oh yeah, I'd be interested to see that. That may be a winter project. I've kind of got UV coming back. There's this body painter wants to test, so the UV's coming back in the winter. So we'll do that, because then it's dark from about 4 o'clock. Well, even earlier than that, the light kind of falls off. So I think that would be really good. Actually, one of the pools has a solid roof, so yeah, that might be really good. We might be able to do it earlier than that.
You have to recommend the best waterproof body paint and things to use.
Yeah, the ones I've not found any to recommend so far. They've all come off on the backdrops to a greater or lesser extent. And one of my, fortunately, the chlorine seems to kill the UV stuff over time, but one of my black backdrops for a while kind of had odd glowy bits on it. So
yeah, I think the black backdrop that I've been using in the studio that it got spotted with makeup, so I just went the whole hog and spotted it with paint and just used it as a sort of abstract.
Yeah. Fortunately, the repeated dunking in the chlorinated water seems to kill most things. So I'm not sure it'll kill the paint, but the makeup seems to disappear after a while.
Right, I'm gonna, I think, yeah. Thank you, Neil. It was really lovely to see the journey of it as well, and just to hear like
yeah, it was very nostalgic, wasn't it?
Yeah, and just to get other people's opinions and thoughts as well. And Helen, if there's anything you want to add, obviously, feel free now or after. But yeah, no, thanks for coming along, and obviously we'll share the session with other people. So on. And then next month, it's one of the mermaids There's two men.
Be Sarah, yeah. So Water Dragon UK, I think next month, and then Jazz the month after. I need to book my ticket for Jazz.
With the mermaid. Oh yeah, yeah. I was going to say, like, as soon as they came out, I said, "Oh, Andy's booked for all of them," and then I think it's Jasmine. Okay, lovely to see everyone again, and then
yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for spending an hour with us.
All right, thanks everyone. Bye. Thanks, Neil.
Am I the admin now? Do I need to turn it off?
No, I think anyone can do it. Yeah.
All right.